If you sit down and really listen to Gen Z, something feels different almost immediately. The way they talk about life, question norms, and make decisions doesn't follow the patterns most people are used to. It's not just what they believe, it's how they think. The way Gen Z thinks is a direct result of the world they grew up in, a world that moved faster, showed more, and demanded more awareness than ever before. This is the first generation to grow up fully connected to the internet, not just using it, but living alongside it from a young age. Social media, instant communication, constant information, it's always been there. This has completely changed how they process reality. For previous generations, information was limited. You learned from your environment, your community, and a few trusted sources. But Gen Z has access to everything all the time. This creates awareness, but also overload. They're exposed to global issues, different perspectives, and constant updates. They see problems earlier and more often. Topics like mental health, inequality, climate change, and identity are part of their everyday awareness. As a result, they tend to think more critically about the world around them. But this constant exposure also has a cost. When your brain is processing so much information, it becomes harder to filter what truly matters. This can lead to anxiety, overthinking, and the feeling that everything is urgent all the time. It's not that Gen Z is weaker, it's that they're dealing with a level of input previous generations didn't face. Another major difference is how Gen Z views identity. For many of them, identity is not fixed. It's something that can evolve and be explored. They are more open to questioning labels, roles, and expectations. This can look confusing or unstable from the outside, but from their perspective, it's about authenticity. They're less willing to accept roles just because that's how it's always been. Whether it's career paths, gender roles, or life milestones, they tend to question first and follow later. This leads to more freedom, but also more uncertainty. When there's no clear script to follow, every decision feels more personal, and personal decisions carry more pressure. Another important factor is how Gen Z views work and success. Older generations were often taught that success comes from stability, finding a secure job, working hard, and staying consistent over time. Gen Z has seen a different reality. They've grown up during economic instability, rapid technological change, and shifting job markets. They've seen people work hard and still struggle. They've seen traditional paths fail. So naturally, they question the system. Many of them prioritize flexibility, purpose, and mental well-being over a traditional success. They're less willing to sacrifice their entire life for a job that doesn't feel meaningful. This can be misunderstood as laziness or lack of commitment, but often, it's a different calculation. They're asking, is this worth my time and energy, rather than automatically saying yes. Mental health is another area where Gen Z stands out. They talk about it more openly than previous generations. Therapy, anxiety, burnout, emotional awareness, these are normal conversations for them. This openness is a strength. It reduces stigma and allows people to seek help earlier. But it also means they're more aware of their struggles. Sometimes, this awareness can feel overwhelming. When you have the language to describe your emotions, you notice them more. And when you notice them more, they can feel more intense. It's not that Gen Z feels more, it's that they recognize and express what they feel more clearly. There's also the impact of constant comparison. Growing up with social media means constantly seeing other people's lives, success, beauty, relationships, achievements, it's all visible all the time. This shapes expectations. Even if they know it's not fully real, it still influences how they see themselves. It can create pressure to be successful earlier, look a certain way, or have life figured out quickly. And when reality doesn't match those expectations, it can lead to self-doubt. All of this leads to an important point. Gen Z doesn't think differently by accident. Their mindset is a response to the environment they grew up in, an environment that is faster, more connected, more uncertain, and more complex than ever before. One of the biggest psychological patterns in Gen Z is their need for authenticity. They are highly sensitive to anything that feels fake, forced, or performative. Whether it's in people, brands, or institutions, they tend to question things that don't feel real. This is partly because they've grown up seeing how easily things can be edited, filtered, and presented online. They know how simple it is to create a polished image that doesn't reflect reality. So instead of trusting appearances, they look for honesty. This can be a powerful strength. It pushes for more transparency and real conversations. But it can also make them more skeptical and less trusting, especially when things don't feel genuine. Another key trait is their relationship with attention. Gen Z grew up in an environment designed to capture and hold attention. Short videos, constant notifications, fast-moving content. As a result, their brains are used to quick stimulation. This doesn't mean they can't focus. It means their attention works differently. They often prefer fast, engaging, and visually dynamic information. Long, slow, or repetitive content can feel harder to stay engaged with, not because they lack ability, but because their brain is used to a different pace. At the same time, this constant stimulation can make it harder to sit with boredom. And boredom, while uncomfortable, is important. It's where creativity, reflection, and deeper thinking often begin. Without it, the mind stays in a reactive state rather than a reflective one. Another important aspect is how Gen Z handles uncertainty. Compared to previous generations, they are more aware that the future is unpredictable. Technology is changing fast, industries are shifting, and traditional paths are less stable. Because of this, many of them don't rely on long-term plans in the same way. Instead, they focus more on adaptability. They think in shorter time frames, stay open to change, and are willing to pivot when needed. This flexibility can be a major advantage in a rapidly changing world. But it can also create anxiety. When nothing feels stable, it's hard to feel fully secure. Even when things are going well, there's often an underlying sense that everything could change quickly. This creates a constant low-level tension. There's also a strong desire for meaning. Gen Z doesn't just want to do something. They want it to matter. Whether it's work, relationships, or personal goals, they often look for purpose behind their actions. This can lead to more thoughtful decisions, but it can also make choices harder. When everything needs to feel meaningful, even small decisions can carry more weight. It's not just, what should I do? But, does this align with who I am? That level of reflection can slow things down and create pressure. Another defining trait is their openness to change. Gen Z is generally more accepting of new ideas, different identities, and evolving social norms. They're less attached to tradition for the sake of tradition. This openness allows for growth and progress, but it also means they're navigating a world with fewer fixed guidelines. Without clear rules, people have to create their own paths, and that can feel overwhelming. There's also the emotional side of all this. Because Gen Z is more aware, more connected, and more reflective, they often feel things deeply. They're not ignoring problems, they're facing them earlier and more directly. This can make them seem more anxious or sensitive. But another way to look at it is that they're more in touch with reality. They're not numbing or avoiding as much, they're processing. And processing takes energy. It's important to understand that every generation develops strengths based on its challenges. Gen Z's strengths include awareness, adaptability, openness, and emotional intelligence. These are valuable traits in a complex and fast-changing world. At the same time, their challenges, overstimulation, anxiety, comparison, and uncertainty, are directly connected to those same strengths. They're not separate issues. They come from the same source. So when people say Gen Z thinks differently, they're right, but different doesn't mean wrong. It means they're adapting to a world that's very different from the one previous generations experienced. And like any generation, they're still figuring it out. Because in the end, every generation is shaped by its environment, and Gen Z's environment has been faster, louder, more connected, and more unpredictable than ever before. So their mindset reflects that. Not better, not worse, just different.